Awesome. Should we do minutes real quick?
Let's do that
Okay.
after.
We're gonna do minutes. We're gonna do all the normal beginnings at the end today.
So the redone agenda is there, and if we need to alter it further, we can. But for now, we wanted to make sure we had time to talk about our transportation request for the CIP. The city council has asked this committee and our experts to report back, and we have a number of people here who are interested. So I thought,
I could speak to it if you.
yes, good. I was going to ask Josh and Bill, and then I have some comments, and then we want to open it up to everyone.
So big picture, as most people know, the Sustainability Committee has been pushing to advance several items in the capital improvement plan based on recommendations from the Climate Action Plan. One of them in particular, I'll just call it a transportation study, includes a lot of different things in it, whether it be a microtransit or including a shuttle loop. I'll just say it real briefly like that. And currently, as it's set up, the funding that's would be for it is kind of non-existent. It's hoping that we would get funds either from the state or federal government, which we don't think are available. What several of the counselors are pushing to do and have asked is to change that in the next 2 upcoming fiscal years. And fiscal years start in the middle of the summer for us. So we're in fiscal year 26, and this would be for fiscal year 27 and 28. If I have those years wrong, let me know, please. And to make the funding for those 2 years, instead of federal grants or state grants, general fund, so taxpayer money. And the way it's currently structured, if for 27 and 28, if those funds don't become available, then hypothetically 29, the funds will be general fund. The discussion on the city council essentially boiled down to there's already studies that have been done out there. There was a great study done by VIA on microtransit, which essentially says there's a range of options out there. From might be $900,000 investment. Well, they'll set everything up turnkey. Here are the vehicles, here are the drivers, here's the app. If people want to use this Uber-like thing, they can hop on a microtransit shuttle, which is essentially corner to corner. Or something real basic where they just provide the app and they give you some other guidance. There's that study that exists. There's another study out there, which I'm not going to attempt the name of because I don't have the memory for it, which goes over all parking needs and issues that have been considered. And I believe that's just 2 years old, that one that came out. And there's several arguments made for and against the funding, but the question specifically for the city, from the city council for us, is if this funding is changed from hypothetical state and federal grants to general funds, taxpayer funds, what specifically would the money be used for? Because we already know several things. Like if we went to double coast funding, that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get a double in coast buses because it's not a Portsmouth program. The money could go elsewhere in the coast system, and maybe they would let us have some more pickup opportunities with their actual pickup service that they have. Likewise, we know what microtransit might cost. So I want to see what specifically this committee thinks the gap is that we could fill, because knowing what microtransit costs, the city council could just vote to start a microtransit program. Or knowing what coast could hypothetically cost, they could do that with the money. Is that a fair summary?
Mm-hmm. And it's great. I know Bill Lyons has been at all these capital budget hearings, but it's really great to catch everybody up. I would like to ask Bill to speak to this because you put a lot of time into it.
Yeah. I mean, having been to the 3 capital budgets, I've got a sense of the interests and the concerns of the council members. And I think that there are a couple of disconnects, and I think there's a lack of clarity about, because I think we've been talking about microtransit or shuttle, or if you read the words up there, it says this project is a feasibility study for expanded public transit. And I think the problem is that the microtransit has been too much of the focus. And I think the study that Josh mentioned on microtransit was actually a pitch from a vendor to the Economic Development Committee, but it seemed pretty thorough, I mean, for bounding what's involved. I think there was a concern not only about focusing only on microtransit, and I think that's the problem, because when we looked for a project to propose, we went to the the Climate Action Plan, and microtransit is in there along with implementing the bike ped plan. And this was DTS 4, and there's a DTS 3, which is expand public transit for choice riders. Those are people who have alternatives. And for captive riders, those are people who don't have alternatives to public transit. And I think we would be much better served if the title was DTS, the DTS 3, which is expand public transit, look at alternatives, which could include microtransit. It could include a shuttle. It could include taking a look at coast's existing routes to see if frequency could be added for that within Portsmouth, or there would be a chance of getting to more destinations without a transfer. And I think that Coast, who's here, probably would confirm that the frequency is the biggest problem, and I think, and the coverage. So I think the focus here really needs to be how to improve the use of public transit, including a whole range of different options. And I think when the council was discussing this proposal and getting comments, including from Margot behind me from Coast, they used the term ecosystem. And as a transportation planner, I wouldn't use the word ecosystem, but I would say that that's really on the right track, which is looking at the connectivity of all modes, not only the traditional fixed route bus, but potentially other things like a shuttle, also including parking, and that I would say ideally should be part of what the study is, instead of getting hung up on microtransit, which I'm personally not a big fan of. I think there are microtransit applications in different places, and I think probably it's not a perfect fit here, and that should be part of consideration. So I think when the councilors were proposing moving up the funding, I think they were looking at getting going with some quick in-house research that would hopefully include the Sustainability Committee to look at where the interest is. And I think the funding is a really important part of it, looking at federal and state funding. And I can tell you, having worked from the federal government for 40 years, that the funding is very tight, and the available non-discretionary funding is really used by Coast and by Wildcat, and to some extent by C&J. There isn't a lot rattling around in the discretionary special project programs. I think could use a look at, but probably is not available. And looking forward, the proposal from the current administration is to cut out the major source of public transit in the US, which is the gas tax. So that's a quick run through.
I'd like to make sure and get some time in before Josh has to leave for another meeting, right? Do you have to leave at 7?
I have to leave
I
at 7.
have to leave
If Sean
at
Clancy has to leave at 7. I'm not sure.
Okay, so I wanted to talk before 7. How's that? I did get time to look at both studies. One was a parking study by Desmond Company, and the other, as Bill said, was a presentation, mostly marketing from VIA, but a lot of information in both studies. Both the studies concluded that we need a study. They said the data was inadequate, but also that the problem wasn't defined. What were we looking for? So I think that would be included in our response to the city council, that we've looked at the studies, both recommended another study was needed. And it would look at, as Bill mentioned, not microtransit, but transportation generally, including microtransit, shuttles, and connectivity. And I thought this committee could play a role convening a task force that would include Coast and EDC and the Planning Department, Rockingham Planning Commission, Parking, Traffic, and Safety. And the task force would need to define what the problem is, the scope of the study, and write an RFP or a draft RFP for Planning Department review. Part of the problem definition includes a number of user groups, and I don't think that came across in the city council meeting, that aside from visitors and tourists, we have students, employees in downtown Portsmouth, we have the new co-housing, people without cars that live downtown, disabled people, senior people, all with slightly different needs. And there is, I think this was mentioned in the VIA report, the funding potential with large employers, hotels, perhaps developers in lieu of parking, those kind of arrangements. So it does need further study. So I wanted to check with you, Josh, would that be a memo from the committee back to the city council? What form does this report back take?
It could be any type of form. It could simply be me speaking to it. It could be yourself speaking to it. If you wanted to, the committee could do a memo explaining it. We have it submitted in time, which is probably the Wednesday after Thanksgiving. That could be in the city council packet, which will be available for everyone to see. And then everyone have a chance to read it prior to know what our ask would be. So that's probably the most effective way. I don't think we'll have any opportunities to put slides up in front of them.
So that's for the December 8th meeting. We have it
Correct.
in the week before the Wednesday.
Right.
Okay.
Can I just add? I think I was actually gonna say a lot of what you said, Effie, but you said it much better than I did. I would have. We have Brad Nichols here. I think it might be worth, if Brad, if you're willing to come and talk to us for a couple minutes about Coast and what they do. But I think the important thing, I think the working group is an excellent idea, and I think that's something that will get it further along in understanding what we need and how to do it. But I also,
I'll do it.
or you can talk from there, okay. I also think that we haven't really made an effort at this point to engage local businesses, and I think that's really important. There's a lot of benefit that could be had from them if we know what we want to ask for, but I think the first thing we need to do is figure out what we're gonna ask for too, and do they want to be involved in the process, or do we ask them later, and how does that work? So, and Sean Clancy from the EDC is here as well, and he has to leave at 7 as well. So if you want to add anything, Sean,
And I'd say
please, I just
Brad
want to
and
make sure
Sean-
you recognize him.
If you guys could set the table,
Okay.
because it's being recorded and that's the big microphone in the sky.
And I'd like to just make a plug on that of like, it sounds like a lot of this interest is making sure that we're not approaching a problem we don't know with a solution already, and we're figuring out exactly what that problem is. And especially for me, I think be interesting, these two gentlemen who know these riders in this system and these studies much closer. If it feels that way to you as well, where you see some of these like kind of glaring either groups of who would be riders that are really struggling with the current system. Like where are those areas that day to day you're seeing or that have been talked about a lot in the past that might be an example of us finding and defining those users or that area or, that schedule and then figuring out how we solve it.
Struggling, and I would also say potential, because the initial motivation for this committee is the climate action plan, with the transportation sector contributing 60% of the greenhouse gases and a small current share. Where are the opportunities to reduce the car traffic and get people onto alternatives?
I thank you for the opportunity. I would just start by saying, we are your public transit system. You have a voice on our board. Sean's actually your rep for the city of Portsmouth. I'd love for the city to be more involved and engaged in deciding what you want your public transportation system to be like. I think that's wonderful. So I'd start there. I think to look at this more holistically is a great approach. I think there are a lot of services, when I've talked to folks in the city, there are a lot of services people don't understand that we provide. We have our public transit system, which is the fixed routes that we operate. We have our ADA paratransit services we operate. That's your public transit system. That's between $500,000 and $600,000 that the city contributes toward this year. Then on top of that, the city contracts with us to provide senior transportation. That's another $250,000 or so this year that the city's providing, and that's for residents of the city that are older or living with a disability that need to go anywhere within the city or 5 miles beyond the city now. So those are the two main services we offer here. We can do whatever the city would like us to do. We're open to that. We do still need to connect to the rest of the region. That's really critically important to get employees here, quite honestly, and that's the number one reason why people ride Coast. Second highest reason people ride is for shopping, groceries, what have you, and then to access medical appointments. That's our fixed route side. On the demand response side, it's the flip. It's accessing medical services, shopping, and for work. So we think that there are certainly opportunities to relook how we provide service in the city. There are what I think we need to look at first and foremost is improving frequency. We operate a system that is basically designed on what is called coverage. We try to be as accessible as possible for as many people as possible across the region, but also here in the city. We don't have enough frequency to be really ridership driven. You need to be, at an hour, we're just not there.
For those choice riders, you mean?
Well,
Or just in general?
so we don't use choice, and
Yeah.
everybody's on a spectrum. But yeah, people who have other means to be more of a potential solution, yeah, we need to have higher frequency. So, and there are ways that, I was talking to our board yesterday.
Yes.
Only yesterday. About ways that we could do that. And there is a way next fall that we could be really aggressive and go after discretionary funds to increase our frequency system-wide. And the federal government would pay for 80% of that. That's huge. Normally, the federal government will pay about 50% of our operating costs. And that's no longer restricted to 3 years like it was through this program in the past. Now it's indefinitely. So there are ways to go about this. The other thing I will say, jumping around a little bit, the other thing I will say is there is some discretionary planning funding that you could go after. It's controlled by the state DOT, but I think it's the 5305 program. And don't know exactly the timing on it, but you're not in bad shape. There's time to put something together and submit certainly within the next year. And that, I don't know how much money there is there, but there is some.
You said that Portsmouth contributes $600,000 a year?
To the public transit system.
Yep.
And then there's another 200. Right now, it's about mid-500s to the public transit system, and then it's about another 250,000 towards senior transportation.
Are there other government entities that contribute to your company?
Oh, absolutely. So we're not a company, we're a nonprofit.
Okay.
We've been operating here for almost 45 years.
Mhm.
Every community we serve contributes towards Coast.
Okay.
The state of New Hampshire contributes to Coast.
How much?
This year it's just under $350,000. Traditionally, it's been zero, but in the last couple of years, that there's a number there. The state of Maine contributes towards coast. Stratford County contributes towards coast. And then we have a variety of partners who contribute as well.
In the federal government?
Federal government, yes, is a little over 50% of our fund. We have about an $8.2 million budget this year.
When you say planning funds, those are pass-throughs of the federal planning funds, like the federal highway and the federal?
Through
Transit.
federal transit, pass-through funds through the New Hampshire DOT.
And is that also the case for Rockingham Planning Commission and the Metropolitan Planning Organization? Because
So-
they also use the planning funds.
There are two different sources of planning funds in this case. So these are discretionary planning funds that the DOT has regular solicitations for.
Have you had success in tapping into that before? My sense is there's
Yeah.
always a lot of competition for that. So
It varies from year to year. Stratford and Rockingham Planning Commissions just completed a study, accessibility study for sidewalks in key hotspots for public transit in Portsmouth and Dover. See that grant a year and a half ago or so, they just completed it this spring. So there is precedent for successfully going after those funds and completing studies. Based on what I hear from DOT, I'm the chair of the Statewide Transit Association. Based on what they give for monthly updates to us, they're looking for people to apply for those funds.
and that could fund
Some portion.
part of the study.
I don't know if it would fund the whole study. But
So those have matches or incentives to?
They do. Yep, they're 80-20, so the federal government would cover 80% of expenses related to that grant.
And Sean, do you want to add anything before you have to leave?
Just that I think there's a missing piece in the employers, and I think there's an opportunity to really engage them in a comprehensive plan in a way that they do what they have to do to run their business, and some of them are more proactive than others, but a lot are just hoping that it's gonna get better. So I think to bring a plan to demonstrate, here's a way it could be that would better serve you. I think it's good for the city, I think it's good for Coast and the climate action plan as well. So that's the opportunity.
Peter, do you have anything before you?
No, I think you're on the right track, and I think if we can get something back to the council, it seems like makes sense. You don't know what the number is, maybe guess. But, I think this is all great, and I think that the goal is to get something that can work in Portsmouth to get people either through Portsmouth or around Portsmouth.
And as the sustainability committee, we're always looking at co-benefits, and I think we've touched on some of those already. Potential benefit, one that we haven't touched on is affordable housing, and I think that's one that clearly is a city's priority with all the new Portsmouth Housing Authority and new developments, particularly along Route 1, Lafayette Road. So at the same time, getting people onto buses can reduce the carbon footprint of the transportation sector. The same bus can also be providing low-wage workers to restaurants and hospitality centers, or attracting tourists who could arrive here, let's say from Logan by C&J, hop on the bus and have a car-free visit. And we've talked about some best practice examples like Savannah and Charleston and Burlington. So I think the really useful focus for any study is not only different types of transportation, but different needs and different beneficiaries, because those may be potential investors.
Mind if I jump in? Yeah. So we carried on the public transit system just over 140,000, or we boarded just over 140,000 people in Portsmouth last year.
Wow.
On the senior transportation, it's another 7,300 or so. Where was I going? Oh, if the city of Portsmouth wanted to invest more in the public transit system, those dollars would stay in the city of Portsmouth.
Okay.
We would not use that elsewhere in the system.
That was a concern that was raised.
Yeah, no, if you're, an example of that is the trolley system we built up here in the city. First we had the concentric loops and then we changed that to lines. But the city's contributions all along for those services stayed in the city. So, yep, absolutely.
I have a question. Who applies for the grant? If we were to apply for that grant that you're talking about, does the committee apply for it or does the city apply for it? How do you get
Peter.
It's Peter and
Kate and I, Sean.
Yeah.
Staff would apply, but I think telling us what to apply for and this, I hadn't heard about this New Hampshire
Yeah.
DOT one, and that sounds like a good one to match, maybe we need some money to match it and get it started, but I think it's good perspective. They had us look at those reports and it does seem to say, figure out what you want to do, really.
Yeah.
So,
And I can get you details on that grant opportunity and who can apply. I assume the city can apply, but
So it sounds like, well, I think we're just trying to be conscious of time because I know we have to run. We're first off on the means and methods. Are we gonna go through Josh on bringing this to city council, or do we want to plan a mechanism to draft something that encompasses all of this? We could also do a combination of both. We
Yeah,
could draft it and then
combination
hand it to
being-
you, rather than having to do a formal thing that we had to get into the package. That's probably the easiest, and then you feel like you have
Yeah.
all the information. Great.
and from a process standpoint, if the committee could agree on and vote on a set of, an outline, say, or a set of things that are in the memo,
Yeah.
then you don't have to circulate it to the committee or hold another meeting, because you won't be able to get a vote by the committee again until next month. So if you want to get it by the December 8th meeting, if the committee can all agree on what you're going to say in that memo, then it's just a matter of crafting the memo.
So I have one question about timing. I was trying to find that grant you mentioned, the planning grant, and a few years back, the deadline was January of 2023. So let's say it's the same type deadline this year, and that money becomes available in July, the fiscal year. Would we put in the CIP then for 2027 for the matching bit? Because it's 80 Fed, 20 city, I think.
Yeah, I think you'd want to do it this same cycle. Yep.
Okay.
do you have the flexibility if it's not in the CIP to apply for it with other funds or
Might be able to
because
come up
this
with
is a
the funds.
planning
Yeah.
study?
You might be able to come up with the funds, but if it's adjusting what was in the CIP to something, then the council can decide to push it out a year if they feel like this grant is gonna be a big part of it, but I don't.
So we would go with Counselor Cook and Counselor Moreau's amendment to make it general funds and revenue, saying that this money may be available. It's competitive and we don't know.
Yeah, or you could do general fund and state fund.
Yeah.
Oh,
You could
for-
do a line for
I-
each,
yeah,
and the
it's not
20
revenue.
would be the state or 80 would be the state and 20 would be the city, but.
Yeah.
Josh, would we have the flexibility to change the title from microtransit, which is DTS 4 in the climate plan, to explore public transit options, DTS
Yeah, the
3?
titles could change. We could
Okay.
make that recommendation.
So I think that's probably the first thing we need to vote on and agree on, is that I think the way this has been phrased so far is probably not accurate.
Yeah.
The title, I think the title is not accurate. The description, I think, is
Is.
accurate.
Okay.
And
Thank
Thank you so much.
Thanks for being on short notice.
And I think it could also reference not only the DTS 3, which is that one
Yeah.
up there, which is expand public transportation. It could reference DTS 4, like, for example, consider alternatives like microtransit DTS 4. And I think the key on all of this is to be thinking at a systems level where it's public transit connecting to walking, biking, and also considering parking. And I think that's really key. And that if you have the chance to look at that parking study, it does a really good job about talking about parking, managing parking demand through connectivity to coast and connectivity to UNH Wildcat and connectivity to potential shuttles that could be publicly operated with satellite parking. And I think that's exactly an example of the type of systems approach with the multiple needs that I think maybe a task force could really help.
Okay,
Fire.
well, I just want to outline this so that we can vote on it. And then we can like figure out,
Just to say, Bill, I think, is doing the minutes for
Yes.
this meeting. So do you want to keep track of the outline
yeah,
as we?
yeah.
yeah,
So
so I
first thing
think,
is the title.
Add to what Bill said, we should reference employers as well.
Yeah,
and-
Okay.
and the language.
so first thing is we're expanding it from this microtransit to a more ecosystem-based study to match the description.
So public transit study might be our title.
yeah. Strategic
Sustainable,
public
but
transit
it's-
study. something
yeah.
like that.
But I mean, if we want to inlay parking and bike ped, right, I think it's even broader. It's the interactive,
Holistic,
yeah, of.
I think the
public
strategic
connected.
strategic transportation study,
There, we just type the bullets on the screen.
I worry we're gonna get into minutia if we
Yeah.
do that.
I think the text could take care of that by referencing the parking and the connectivity in the
Okay,
mode. I mean, that's pretty standard transportation planning is a multimodal system, which also considers all these potential modes.
okay,
We don't need to have the text down for
Right.
what's in the packet. We just need to have the text down for the
To vote.
bullets that we'll be voting on.
yeah.
So are we okay to change the title, recommend changing the title from the microtransit to?
That is what I'm trying to,
Yes.
but I'm trying to get these things in a bullets that we can all vote on all of them at once rather than individually along the way.
The year.
So the first one would be to change the title. We will work on that specific title, but I think we are all in agreement of expanding it to match the definition better and expanding it to point to the both parts of the cap. The second part, I would say, is this task force or working group, blue ribbon committee, whatever you want to call it, to work alongside the city, alongside Coast, alongside sustainability committee and other, relevant parties.
See,
RP,
economic development.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I would thank the council for sending the reports and say they were great reports. Both reports recommended a study, just to make that clear.
So that's three things so far.
Three
Changing the
things, right.
title,
Task force.
the creation of a task force, and
Thank-
thanking the council for the reports and pointing out that the reports are calling for studies.
And then, so our last bullet would be that the task force is to put together the request for proposal for a study, which is what we're asking for the funding for.
So I think the last one is accepting the general approach of the year's funding and flagging that we will still be pursuing things like the state funding opportunities for the study.
And by that you mean, so supporting
The general fund.
Counselor Cook's and Moreau's amendment for general funding. So full general funding, however, pursue whatever the state.
Yes,
grant
I
wants.
would say full general funding so that it is there. However, in lieu,
Yeah.
we could have state funding and that also makes it so those funds are available for whatever match we need to come and we're not gonna get in a situation where we go for funding. And then there's a match and then we need to figure out where that's going from and instead it's, oh, we didn't need all X dollars for
we
this.
can call out the focus on the planning funds. Because there's lots of different funds, but this is specifically for planning studies and Brad mentioned the state source, and I think there's also another source that goes through the MPO.
Yeah, there is through the MPO as well, but in this, I'd be careful not to say state or federal. I wouldn't say one versus the other, say both.
So other funding sources, including local businesses who might be interested in contributing to. Given that that's, I think, a big part. The Economic Development Committee on that group, I think, is a big part of it. So that's 4.
When we say other sources, there's a distinction between other sources that would be a source of support for the study and the study including a look at funding in general, which could come from federal, state, or could come from city, or could come from private sector.
Funding for the
developers.
actual,
Yeah, so having two
Solutions that
separate
come out.
bullets might make sense.
yeah, so both funding for the study, which is general funds, and then possibly other funds that can be acquired through grants, and then in the study itself, which would that be a modification to the description? Or do you think the description's broad enough
I
for this
I
to
think
make?
that it's important to distinguish between microtransit and this broader look. That is what we're talking about in this SIP project, but I don't think we need to go into a lot of detail on that because that could come out through the collaborations of the task force. We just want to make sure that it's clear that this is a very holistic study that we're talking about. And it's geared toward multiple needs and beneficiaries, which can be fleshed out later.
And I think that like in good faith too, that it's not just a study to figure out how much we all need to spend on the next thing. It's how do we be efficient in finding other means to fund this, not just under this assumption that it's then going to be an additional ask after this study, which I think is where a lot of this trepidation and more studies that tell us we need to spend more money and then actually getting that money is a challenge, right? So I think this might be a helpful thing
And
to
as
outline.
much as it's looking for sources of money, it's also looking for partnerships that have needs that could be met through.
And just to be clear, number 3, it's both studies recommend a further study.
Yeah.
And I would say that this group, the task force, would be defining the problem.
Would be guiding the study to define the problem,
The study, right?
right?
Yeah.
But-
Guiding the
Right.
process to make sure that that study is looking at that ecosystem, doing
Right.
the
And to write a
what we
draft
want,
off.
yes, to find that problem.
Okay.
And I think if the task force ends up developing an RFP, part of the task force responsibility would be to really frame this in terms of a holistic approach, but also in terms of potential beneficiaries and financial sources, which could be, for example, but that you don't really know that till you do the analysis.
Okay,
Also, we keep on using the word problem. Can we also include opportunity?
Yeah.
absolutely. And I, I think that's a great flag and maybe we just call it opportunities to be
And-
on the positive side of things.
Either Margot or Tyler, you guys are both here. Do you wanna give anything to contribute or?
Well, I was just thinking about your task force and describing what it's going to do. And I think Rad could probably give you in 3 sentences the most important questions that he would ask you to say, what do you want out of the public transit system? Are you trying to define who your riders are? What parts of town do you want to reach? How many people do you want to carry? Just give some of those
How
initial
efficiently do
questions.
you want to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, because, yeah. There are some very basic questions just to figure out, and that will help guide the RFP.
Because I think right now it just looks like a study after a study after a study after a study. But
Yeah.
if you say the task force needs to define these sorts of things before you can even put together this grant request, because otherwise they're just the state or whoever it is gonna look at it and say, oh, they just want to do another study after another study. But if you can show that the task force has said, we know what we want to find out and the problems we want to solve, and here they are. And then you take that to a great consultant like Jared Walker or whatever it is, and he'll help you, or his group will help you say, okay, to solve these problems, we need to know, and we need to design a system that does this. And I would also like to throw out, since you've given me the floor, because this is interconnected with Dover and Rochester and Somersworth and the other communities, you might be able to get them to help you with the cost of the bigger study, but they're gonna wanna do what you're outlining for their town. They're gonna wanna define their goals, and you put all that together, and now you've got the whole ecosystem covered. And you can look at it as a holistically, but each town has already defined what its goals are. as opposed to people being in all sorts of different places in different timeframes.
Makes sense.
Commentary.
One thing, you mentioned there were 140,000 boardings. I mean, for one thing, we don't wanna, we wanna continue to have those same boardings happen. We wanna have additional ones that aren't currently boarding. I guess another way of framing it, the opportunity is that we have a base, we wanna add to the base, we want more people riding the bus.
And I think to help with the understanding of where we're starting, we have examples of opportunities because we've talked about that quite a bit. And the city council talked about some specific ones like affordable accessibility as a part of affordable housing with all the push in the city for affordable housing. Getting lower wage workers to hospitality jobs. There's a real shortage of workers in town. Car-free tourism. I mean, those are three examples of problems and opportunities, but that to give a sense of what a future RFP or study would look at is how to address that with the starting point of the current coast system.
Relief on parking.
And parking, yes, parking, definitely the parking.
Can I just add my one word?
Please.
I'm just gonna echo Rad, because he says it at every meeting and I know it. It's frequency.
Yeah.
Focus on frequency.
I think frequency, and the other thing is the connectivity. If you looked at folks in Portsmouth who could be riding the bus, I think part of it is that if you want to make a 2-mile trip, to have to make a connection is difficult. So it's both the frequency and the connectivity.
Especially as we've gotten so much new housing development
Yeah.
recently and they aren't.
I will say, no mind.
Yeah.
Our new system makes the connection a whole lot simpler. And more reliable. So I think somebody said at the council meeting that it, you know, it took an inordinate amount of time to go across the city. That was quite a bit longer than it actually takes.
Interesting.
Yes, it's not, yes, it takes longer than it would take for you to drive directly in your car, but it's not nearly as bad as it was made out to be.
I also think, and this is maybe preaching to the choir because we're the sustainability committee, but if we put into transit what we put into cars, like it's not really a one-to-one comparison of, oh, it's so much more convenient to get in my car and go somewhere. And it's like, well, that's because we've prioritized that so much.
And if the city were to invest, whether through city funds, federal, state grants, or private sector contributions, and really geared toward increasing the use of public transit within the city, recognizing it's part of a regional system, that would be a good chance to engage with Coast. If there's additional resources, how could they best be used to overcome the problems of frequency and connectivity? You know, I know you've cut back some routes. Is the money best spent putting those routes back in place, or could there be ways of maybe tweaking the route structure that would be focused to producing greater ridership in Portsmouth? And all that seems like it would be fair
Can I?
topics that could be explored with the task force.
Time wise, do you want to move on?
Yeah, so I was just gonna say, I think, you know, we could define the task force and we could start doing the task force. And I think it's important for us to have this definition because it's what we're gonna be going forward with. But I do, you know, I think the points about having these essential questions is really important. The points about having, you know, a diverse kind of this people, profit, planet lens on all of these opportunities, not problems. But overall, I would love to get a vote from the committee on these 4 items that we have outlined here. Before I ask for that, are there any things that we've talked about that we do not feel like are represented in this 4? Or do you think generally this 4 covers all the topics we've had?
Only thing I would add, and this is I would simply add parking, traffic and safety to that potential list
Mm-hmm.
to make the member from the parking, traffic and safety committee, who's chair. Feel good?
I would also add community, general
Yeah.
community member.
Yeah.
A couple slots for just general community members.
There may be opportunities for, as part of task force of, public events, public engagement.
I'd just like to make sure we got Bill's co-benefits in there. They're really appealing. We're low-wage workers and the parking elimination and
Affordable housing,
affordable housing. And what was the fourth one?
tourism.
Tourism, car-free tourism. So I think those are really appealing. And it applies to social equity, which is part of our bigger system of.
Is that for who to be involved in the task force or just generally in the study ensuring that?
I just wanted that as a context to make sure you were taking notes. I
So-
wanted to get that in that
Yeah, I mean, it could be,
as examples of a bigger system.
And do we know who's gonna actually write this up?
I can,
I volunteer to with anyone else who would like
Yeah,
to.
if you
join
guys
me.
wanna work together and if you capture those four things that Bert just said, that could be in like a one-page document.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be up here to be voted on.
yeah,
Okay.
no, that's perfect, because the details can come out
Yeah.
later, but these four things are ready to be voted on, basically.
So, proposal to move forward with sending these 4 items and having Bill and other interested parties of the Sustainability Committee draft them to give to Josh to present at the next city council
Can
meeting
we
on
do it
December.
in a way where Colleen and I work on drafting it and then can we circulate it to the rest?
We won't have an opportunity to circulate it back out, so it'd just be us voting on this. And then that vote includes putting our faith into you guys to putting together a one-page.
I promise.
But I don't think we want eliminating parking.
No, managing parking.
Relief from parking overburden, I don't know.
It's it up.
Managing.
Yes, managing.
Yeah. Yeah, I
I
think,
think having car-free tourism and reducing parking demand shifts this conversation to a parking conversation a little bit, and I worry about that.
and you, what about that? Do you like that or don't like that?
No, from a concept support it, I am just hesitant that then the focus becomes on, right, I just,
I think maybe something like managing parking or parking supply and demand because it's part of it. And I think if you leave it out, then,
How about reducing downtown traffic?
I think we have a,
So the
Said
four,
the study is not to focus on the outcome.
Correct.
The study is to
Right.
focus
Right.
on the questions you have to ask and get answered.
so
And the benefits are this.
I think 1 through 4 there, that could just be listed. Those words or different verbiage in the actual write-up. I don't know if we need to be voting on that.
Here.
Right.
So,
yeah,
I think this is set.
just like first list of the benefits. I mean, that's like a first cut at it. It can be part of the write-up.
I can make a motion that we pass it, that we vote on this.
Second.
perfect. All in favor?
All right,
once that's written up and you guys are happy with it, you can send it to both me and Kate.
Mhm.
And then either one of us, I could either put it under my name or ideally Kate just gets it in the packet from a staff perspective. But we can get it in the packet then the night of. If anyone here wants to speak, if you guys write up, you guys could speak to it during the public hearing because it's been extended. And it might even be best to simply say, we have this in the packet. You don't need to read it, say a couple sentences, but like, we're available to answer any questions that you have during the discussion. Then I can motion to suspend the rules where the council could ask you guys questions on it. So I
Okay,
think that's better than
Right.
speaking in detail on something, saying like, hey, we're available to answer questions on what's in your packet, and then they'll be more likely to ask.
That would be great, because usually with the format is you say something and there's no
Yeah, so I think
possibility
that
to
would be.
clarify or answer.
Yeah.
Great, okay, so on that, we'd need to, well, first off, should we finish our vote and then we can get into logistics? Okay. Any opposed? Wonderful, so motion passes. So with that, the write-up through the process with Josh and Kate will get into the packet. Availability on the night of December 8th, right?
Correct.
To speak to the availability of being able to answer questions, should they arise. Does anyone know if they're available on December 8th? Bill, you're available?
Yeah, a question for Josh. Does this get in time for the counselors that would want to modify their motion to
It,
reflect that, or do they have to do that in real time?
they'd be doing it in real time, because this will be submitted the same time that their motion, assuming they're gonna resubmit their motion is, so. And they might not resubmit their motion, because I think it's on the table, so it may automatically come back up.
I can try to find out how much money might be available through the DOT. too.
That would be fantastic.
And
if you
the,
had
and
along any
the
information.
timing, like-
Yeah.
November 26th is the next possible application date.
Is it rolling applications? Is it?
So,
We submit it by November 26th.
sorry, November of 2026. Sorry.
One year.
I-
Got it.
I-
I was like.
No problem, Rad.
Talk in years, sorry.
November of 2026.
Sorry.
Wonderful. Okay.
I
Becky
would-
has something.
I was going to suggest we take a break for 10 minutes with the recording and do our sign-in question, because we went right into this. Usually we have a question before the meeting begins. So it's just like 10 minutes we need to do that. Any ideas about that? Yay, nay?
Is there any issues from a procedural standpoint of us doing that?
And we thank Rad and
Yeah.
thank you for coming.
joining us.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, you don't
First off,
have to stay. Thank you for.
Thank you for your input.
Oh, I was gonna go to the.
Oh, that's right. You have another.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brad, does Bill have your card in case he has any questions when he writes us in?
Bill and I know how to get it. Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Stopping might be.
Yeah, I'm gonna propose, yeah, I'm gonna propose that we just add it, as part of our end, we'll do a longer combined sign off.
Okay.
Because I agree, I worry about just stopping the recording and having people worry about why that happens.
Okay. Onward and upward.
So we're gonna do business before play today. No fun. So moving on,
Minutes?
something easy, well, ish. Accepting the minutes from October 23rd, which I will flag, I did, and I have an edit to them.
I do too. I don't know.
And
if
it
it's
was
the Same one.
Bill's, yeah, and it was Bill's proposal towards the end of the meeting that I did not include in the minutes. He emailed the motion, the language to me, and I just failed to include it. Which is the motion for the Sustainability Committee to conduct research to support CAP implementation, and this was to be added as part of the mission of the Sustainability Committee. Is that correct, Bill?
I think it's just to note that we discussed that, and we didn't do a formal motion. We just discussed that and everyone agreed to that.
Mhm.
Probably less wordy is what I would add to that under CAP committee action spreadsheet is the first bullet where it says, Jess asked the committee if this is helpful. Bill and others emphasize that it's a great way to stay organized and prioritize actions, including the 4 CIP proposals. So that's just that one of the things this committee can concentrate on going forward is the actions in the CAP sheet, particularly the CIP proposals.
Wonderful.
So it's just adding those forward, including the 4 CIP proposals.
So then 2 edits to the minutes that we will vote on. Can we vote on them together?
I had one
3 edits.
more edit. Right at the end where it says New Hampshire cap, it says Bill shared that the New Hampshire cap says seems limited with little policy and dollar nor community support. I'm sure I didn't say that. Bill shared that the New Hampshire cap is accepting final comments. It explicitly avoids calling for policy changes and new funding programs.
I think that is a much more eloquent way to
And
say
it's accurate.
that and accurate.
As they've done.
Apologies for
community
that.
Engagement, like coming to visit us. I don't
Yeah.
want to say they didn't do it.
That is very fair. So that is 3 edits. 1, making sure we include the conversation about the Sustainability Committee's role on CAP implementation, to reflect that at the end of the meeting. 1, to add the CIP initiatives in addition to the CAP action tracker. And the last, to modify the context on the New Hampshire action plan for the context that Bill gave during the meeting.
Kate, should I give you
Yeah.
this?
And, oh gosh, wow, I did not do a very good job, huh? Well, that's okay. I don't take it personally.
You have more minutes than we usually get. I was excused absent, so I wanted
Okay.
that noted, and we've been trying to follow that format because it makes it really hard to know otherwise. We had some members who are absent sequentially, and we didn't know if they were excused, not excused, so I think we should call that out. And I don't know if anyone else was, Colleen, maybe you were
Yeah, I
excused
mean,
as well?
excuse just means you know, ahead of time. I did
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah, that's what I thought, yeah.
Awesome.
And same with Nancy. So we had
Perfect,
3.
man. Yeah, exactly. I went to the slopes.
We don't use First Student for school buses. We use Student Transportation of America, because I got their contract from the superintendent.
I see both. When I look, I see buses go by the street, I see both names.
It might be part of Student Transportation of America, but the actual name on the contract is Student Transportation of America. And I thought that was important for us to know because the speaker we had was from STA.
Okay, on the school board website, I think there's information about First Student.
I have to be honest, I don't know.
Okay.
I'm on the school board.
So,
I don't know. I thought it was Student Transportation of America.
Yeah.
But you do see
I-
buses that say First
Yeah.
Student, so
A
maybe
year-
First Student leases buses to
Yeah.
STA. I don't know.
Because
I'm not
called.
sure what the,
I called
arrangement
the
is-
superintendent's office a year ago, November 20th, 2024. And I talked to the business person and they sent me the contract, which runs through 2027, and it's Student Transportation of America. So I mostly thought that was important because that was the speaker we had come.
and that's the type of context that we were asking for in these speakers.
And then just Seacoast Can, I just didn't know if everyone on the committee knows what that meant. In the community engagement, the first bullet, community climate conversations, says a radio interview with Seacoast Can. And it's Seacoast Climate Action Now, the organization.
They're writing it out.
Well, I don't know. Does everyone know what Seacoast Can is? I don't know.
I didn't know what that was.
So I thought it would be helpful. Seacoast Climate Action Now. And then it said, under the Capitol meeting, Tori spoke to the solar arrays with a response that the city had already done a review of municipal buildings. But Kate and I emailed and nobody seems to know.
So wrong.
That was. You were wrong, okay. Because I couldn't find it anywhere. I want to see
That
it.
was a comment by Peter Rice from DPW during a CIP meeting that Bill and I attended when this came up. that
He
they have
said
done-
it's not necessary because we already have the information.
And it came up again at Monday night city council meeting where Nathan, the deputy city manager, answered that question. I should have timestamped it. It was something to the extent that the study that had already been done focused on existing buildings, but not on open lands.
Yes.
That
Right,
makes sense.
Yeah.
good.
that
So
was what
maybe
our
the study
conversation was.
isn't done yet, and that's why we can't get a hold of it.
The municipal building audit?
Yeah.
Are we on to the discussion of
yeah,
CIP
I-
proposals?
Well, I'm
Or
just
still the
looking at the minutes. and-
minutes, because we're easing into the CIP proposals as
Right,
well.
Right. So I,
So I was just following up on the minutes with Kate, and I said, can we see this study? And that's.
okay, so I
that's
think
why
then
I'm
let's
coming
move that part to the
Okay,
CIP
great.
conversation, because that was just recording that this was talked about as part of
Right,
that CIP
okay.
proposal.
Good.
With that, I think there's enough changes that I would like to make a motion that we make edits to the meetings and then vote on them next time, rather than trying to vote on the 7
FaceTime audio.
different.
Well, you can just, we talked about them all, so you can just vote to edit it all.
And
If others are comfortable with that,
Yeah.
okay, great, so
I think motion to approve the minutes as revised
As
in the
revised.
discussion.
Second,
wonderful. All in favor?
All right,
All opposed? Wonderful, so the minutes from
September.
October 23rd.
October 23.
October 23rd will be revised as we just spoke about. And they are approved by the committee once revised. Great. Okay, so moving into community engagement. First topic is community climate conversations.
We don't have any plan in the immediate future.
I think we've talked about one that focuses on implementation of the cap.
Mhm.
And I think we also just talked about perhaps one is part of the task force, but these are possibilities and they would be into the next calendar year
Great.
and open to suggestions otherwise.
Other questions on that? Okay, Sustainability Fair, Friday, April 10th, 2026.
We will start planning that early in the new year, but I want people to put that date aside, and we will need people from the committee to speak about the committee that afternoon
And that will be held,
at the Connie Bean gym, whatever it's called, in the middle school.
Once again,
April 10th, Friday.
wonderful, Bright Action. Dates,
Um,
changes.
Update on that is not much. I finally got admin privileges today.
Great.
About 3 months too late, but we're gonna use them. So starting next week, I will be updating the numbers to update our goal for households. Not that big of an update, but the other thing is, I was in a call with them last month, I think, and they're starting to do a newsletter for all the Bright Action communities that are signed up. So they'll be doing a monthly push to every single household that's signed up with like a feature of the month of, did you know you could track this in Bright Action, and then a bunch of like stats and stuff. So that'll be exciting. And then if we want, they said that the city can also tack on stuff to their own households if we have content to send out. So that should be starting, I think, in 2026. That's my only update.
What kind of flexibility do you have with the admin privileges to add content? Like if we wanted to add something like, here's information on Coast on the transportation item, here's the link.
I think it's
Et cetera?
limited, but they should have like at least text blocks that you can do pretty
Yeah, they
thoroughly.
call them resources. So you can attach a resource to an action,
Yeah,
action on public transportation. We can add stuff at the bottom through this resource.
local context.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be great, because I think one of the themes we've been hearing is maybe also the problem is that people are not aware of whether it be the existence or improvements or changes, right? And so an experience they might have had 2 years ago is still maybe in their head about what the situation is now. And so I think Ghost being one of them and maybe other resources that we can add, I think that would be great. On that, do we want to do a more kind of formal look at the actions that have opportunity to add resources?
I think that's a great idea and a really great role for this committee to look at it, and particularly since we don't have to go through the developers, but that Kate has a lot of flexibility and Fred has a lot of experience on that as well. And I think we could probably divide it up by topics with people volunteering by topic, like waste, home energy, transportation, there's a limited number of things, and we probably have people interested in each of them.
Great. I mean, it feels parallel with our action spreadsheet in a lot of ways and the conversation we've had about kind of point person on different topics. So I mean, I would propose that between the action spreadsheet and that kind of the typical people who are interested, like I'm happy to help on the building side and Bill on the transportation, and I'm sure Jess on waste. Maybe we can kind of divide and conquer on that side and then ask for just general sustainability committee too. If there's any specific topics or resources that you have in mind, that maybe we bring them to the next meeting. And so at the next meeting, I think we propose that for each of these kind of sections of Bright Action, we can come with some resources to propose for the committee to vote on being included via Kate.
Does everyone on the committee know how to get on Bright Action? And maybe you could email the link to the committee.
Yeah, it's up on our website too.
Doing it
Yeah.
for the next meeting, I think is a good idea, because then we'll do it, and
Oh, I will flag, I will not be here the next meeting, and it is December, which is always a challenge.
we should do it for the next
So
meeting.
maybe we should, I think we keep it on the agenda for the next meeting, but also be conscious that if we don't have either quorum or a decent amount of people, or people have got caught up in the chaos that is the holidays, that we can
It
shift
could
it
be
another
a first
meeting.
cut to get the ball rolling.
Yeah.
And the other thing is to be able to group them so Kate can dig into it all at once instead of in drips and drabs, and get help from the developers if necessary on that. We can do it once well.
Great. So we'll start that process for the next meeting.
The next meeting will be December 18.
Wonderful. Is that good on Bright Action?
I would just highlight that we had goals of like 200 households by December 2025. We are currently at 103, so probably not gonna hit that bit by December 2025. And we're aiming for 100 tons of carbon dioxide reduction, currently at 19% of the goal by December 2025. So I think those were based on like, we had a really good 2024 in Bright Action. Like there was a jump. So we were like, okay, can we keep the jump going? And for whatever reason, it didn't happen.
Tip of the hat, Colleen, for getting into the Bright Action like that.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking on the, I think maybe a conversation in December and or January is then reviewing what some of those goals were, what they were based on. And maybe what changes we either need to make to then still meet those goals, or even a review of effectiveness and why it is that, it's been a challenge to kind of dig in a little bit more on, was the goal unrealistic, or are we missing an opportunity here with Bright Action? Or we could do it in January, and that would be a very new year activity. Thank you, Colleen. That's
I think that looking at Bright Action in terms of the other things we're doing on the committee, including the SIP proposals and the action sheet for the CAP, and constantly thinking of how Bright Action can support community engagement in those things, I think is good. It keeps us synergizing.
moving on to the committee webpage update. I know last time we had a conversation, I think we voluntold.
I
Yeah.
volunteered. I actually willingly raised my hand. And then Colleen offered
That's
to help.
even better than volunteering.
Colleen offered to help out, so she and I collaborated and came up with, I just sent this to Kate a few hours ago.
Wonderful.
It's really just kind of, for one thing, our webpage didn't have, the other committees have like a description of what the committee is. So I included a brief thing on that. And then we have a section on purpose, which just kind of talks about what we're supposed to be doing. And then accomplishments. And then finally, we added a section about how to get involved. So if you're a community member looking at this page, what are the things that you could do? So including like the actions you can take, signing up to Bright Action, and then also, and I didn't make any changes based on your comments yet, Colleen, but also we would include like groups you could, you could sign up with, community groups you can sign up with, Portsmouth Climate Action or Seacoast Climate Action Now, or other things you could do, other groups you can sign up with to kind of help build more community support for these things.
And this would retain the links that are currently on the webpage to all the various documents and things. Probably also adding a link to the events, the events guidelines that we have. So a lot of those resources, but in scope, we were hoping more for like, this is the committee's webpage. This is not sustainability's webpage. There are other web pages on the city website that capture the grandness of sustainability as a topic versus this is the committee.
Right.
What do you need to know about us? Like when we meet, what our ordinance is, all that.
Were you able to make use of the guidelines that I think are a link off of this that we put together?
If there's a link there, it's still there.
No, but I mean, a lot of the content that you created is covered in the guidelines. Like examples and,
Yes.
yeah, good.
And have we had any progress on figuring out if we can be moved in location on the website?
That's already happened, hasn't it?
We've moved? You can find us?
Yes.
That is so
You guys will
exciting.
see. It's pretty cool.
We're real now?
Planning and sustainability boards.
Look at that.
Fantastic.
Wonderful.
Now go to the CAP, the climate action.
Well, okay.
Right there.
So it's right there, or you can go back to like our department page. If you're not on the sustainability page. You go to plans and reports and it's right up here.
Okay, so
Beautiful.
see, that got improved too.
Yeah. No longer has the
Graphics are working.
So that's great.
dashboard that doesn't work.
On the, thank you.
Oh, and sorry, to give another update on the website, Kevin, our producer, gave us some stats from, geez, what was it, like
Yeah,
May?
Bert asked about that last time, right?
Yeah, I think Bert, you asked where it's one of these. There it is. There was something like 600 hits from May to November on the sustainability committee page.
Pretty cool.
600?
Even when it was nested in.
Sorry,
790 bits.
Looking for worse.
It might have been. 94, sorry. All right.
Even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do we compare to other committees?
Oh, jeez. I have no idea.
I'm freaking out.
Yes.
Josh has been slowly adding pairs the entire meeting.
Okay, I want to be a little bit conscious of time. Thank you, Kate. That's great. Great movement. Thank you for drafting those. Are there additional input additions? Do we want to continue to add? It sounds like there's some other things that we might be adding or changing to what we just saw.
It'll still have the committee members and the meeting.
Yeah, the meetings, recordings, committee member links. Mainly the key piece was updating the text that is currently
Right.
there. So I guess maybe if people have maybe if we can send the version once you've made my comments updated to the committee and people can look at it before the next meeting
Then we can
and then we can vote in
on.
December.
I think that sounds great.
I'll do that.
Great, thank you very much. Just quick procedural, we have presentation from experts today?
Oh, down.
I'm just trying to
below here?
figure out timing plan. Sounds like.
Yeah, I left that off because we had so much else to
Okay.
do.
Okay, I just want to make sure I wasn't missing something.
I also skipped the committee action spreadsheet for the cap. But if anyone has to update us about anything,
Do you want to say something about how we can do the updates? Because we've talked about that a bit. I don't know if we concluded. If we have an update, does
yeah,
it go to
to send it
you
to
and-
Jess or me,
Or
and then we'll bring
Kate,
it to the meeting.
right?
Is
One
there
or three.
a way that that spreadsheet can be shared?
No.
No,
it's-
because
Every
we
meeting,
tried.
not, like
Oh.
a static document, but can be
Right.
reshared every time we're also having a meeting, having the agenda, just because I feel like it gets updated and then I'm like, which version do I have?
Yeah, I had been updating it every month, but this month I just couldn't. with
Okay,
The
that's totally
transportation,
fine.
so.
Um,
That precedence.
And then after you've done an update, circulate it like with the agenda before
Yeah,
the next
yeah.
meeting.
Yep,
Great.
that's generally what happens.
Wonderful. Moving on to BIP.
So, we all have been at capital budget meetings, not we all, Colleen, Bill, me, Fred.
Great.
So I don't really have much to say. I mean, everybody knows what our 4 items are. One of them, we were just reporting, thank you, because it's in the electrification of the city fleet study, which Josh has been advocating for some years. There's a solar inventory that I keep on pushing. That's why I was interested in the solar building inventory. And I did make the point that we're talking about land and parking lots and too for this and the feasibility and the capacity. So,
And
Peter,
the-
do you know about this solar
I do.
Public Works Department is doing?
So it's the efficiency inventory, the efficiency of municipal buildings. So in that,
Oh,
they did a whole study, and they included in the study a component that looked at the ability to do solar and the cost to put solar on buildings. And what I would say that is, as long as this committee keeps active with the capital improvement plan, there's I think 9 buildings that they looked at with solar. And they have costs and ability to put it on. Right now, there's money in the CIP to do design and then install solar at the Jones Avenue landfill if that works out.
yeah.
So I think it's gonna be challenging to get more than one project at a time going. So my recommendation would be keep after the council in the CIP to keep studying it. But if we have the buildings looked at, maybe the next step is then to study the city lands that would be eligible. So as a feasibility study, rather than overlap with the buildings, maybe get more information on what they found in the buildings and push for more buildings
So
to get
do you
solar on them.
delay it for another year?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
next year, the CIP is a whole new CIP,
Right.
You can push for it again.
yeah.
And I think that's the time, if you don't have an item in there like this year, and the 50,000 is basically going for the design, my understanding is the design of the solar at the landfill. And then there's money next year, I think it is. And then there's implementation money in out year to put it on other buildings. So I think the idea is to keep adding it to buildings, but I think the way this committee has been working, it's helpful to get a little, attention on the item from the
Yeah.
committee and how it ties into the cap and remind them that we have these cap goals to meet and this is gonna help us.
To that point, the electrification of the fleet item, which didn't get funded last year with general funds, it's now getting funded with general funds without having additional effort, so.
That's great.
And then the 4th item, as far as the CIP goes, the 3rd being the one we opened the meeting with, is the greenhouse gas inventory. And at all of the CIP work session and at the previous meeting, I let the council know that I would have an agenda item to put general funds towards that. Same debate with state and federal is what the city was pushing for, and that's what the CIP working group, I'll just call it that, said, but I wanna change it to general funds. But the question is, do we know how much it might cost?
So I had a conversation with Kate and reviewed like, because we have an application for a fellow from UNH, which is how we've done it in the past. And I think that process works well, but speaking with Kate and then having helped on the volunteer effort when we did it, I think there's a a lot of things that you wish you had access to in that. And I think that, I think to Peter's point during the working committee, like, that process is good. And so how do we just support that and make sure that there are those resources there? And it's not like the planning department having to then find
Right.
budget for that additional support. So, I mean, it's a dangerous question because you will fit the bill to, and so I would say, like, from just my own experience, which is, a small blip, so I would welcome other, I think an additional $50,000 a year to be at planning department's kind of discretion from general funds to be able to get access to resources and additional services as needed. I will flag, we might have a hard time getting people to the table with a number that small,
So,
but it's something.
and with that in mind, I did misspeak. What was recommended was not using the CIP if we go that route, because that's not CIP funding. So, because what was recommended, like just if other funds were available, use other funds. What I was proposing was putting essentially a RFP out there to see if we could get more professionals to come in to do it versus relying on volunteers or relying on UNH interns.
And isn't that only the periodic update?
Yeah, so that would be like
3 years, so it wouldn't be
every 3
50,000 a
years.
year.
Correct, it'd be like, so the way I'm gonna do the motion, if 50,000 is what makes sense, it'd be $50,000 of general funds in FY 27 for an RFP for contractors, and then the out year, let's say FY 30. So every 3 years, just to get it in there. It won't be that exact wording, because I don't wanna tie the city into such specific wording, but just to put general funds in there essentially to get like I said, ideally, a professional contractor in here to do the work.
And I would flag not just a professional contractor, like if the fellow, a lot of it is data sources available to them, tools like tracking tools. Rather trying to find this data after the fact is usually the issue. And so there are, utility connections that you can do across all the municipality. There are, these tools that we could implement that would probably have a subscription cost. That like I really think that having budget for those things so that whether it's a fellow or we decide it's a professional service that we have to do it, that's like, it's only as good as as that part, as that data.
And there's another component. So there's let me just give you a little background on this, on the studies we've done in the past, and we have used UNH fellows. There's 2 studies when you look at it. It's one study combined, but it's really the community and the city government. We have all the data we need to do an inventory of the city government and see how the city government is doing in their greenhouse gas emissions reductions. We don't have all the data we need, and we especially didn't have all the data we needed. I think the picture looks a little better now. When you look at Eversource, it's community power now. So New Hampshire, Portsmouth Community Power, or the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, has made it easier for us to get that data from Eversource. The last inventory we did, I don't want to say anything bad about anyone, but it was pushed upon us on some level by a volunteer who was on the committee, who had a lot of computer expertise and data expertise and had studied it, but didn't show up to do the work that he had committed to. So we had to finish that at the last minute, had our consultants help us. I agree, it wasn't a great study. And again, Eversource didn't provide the data till the last minute. So those 2 things were a problem with that one. The same thing happened with the last one. An intern we had got the data the day before his internship ended. You know, granted, he wasn't the best intern ever maybe, but he was not given the tools to do the work. So, and I think this situation is better. I will tell you, and not to change what your recommendation is gonna be, but I will tell you that we applied for a UNH fellow. These are senior level students, either senior or juniors, or graduate students who apply for this fellowship, and they work for the city for the summer. And we applied for a fellow to be a greenhouse gas inventory person, and it looks like we're gonna get it. So we haven't officially been told that, but it looks like we're gonna get it. Now, we could probably say to them, we wanna change the scope of their work if you really wanna go forward. We did talk to our consultant, VHB, the other day, and it looks like we were thinking 50 to 100. It looks like it's only like 30 to 40.
Oh, wow,
So
great.
I would recommend like 50 or something to do it. We may have to buy a tool, but I don't, even that, I think you can use EPA's tool and do an adequate greenhouse gas inventory. I will tell you also that I was at the New England Municipal Sustainability working group. So there's a group of municipalities that have sustainability managers, and they have been not as keen on greenhouse gas inventories. It's kind of a fading thing, and Tori might know this from professional experience, but getting the actions moving forward, we know what the actions are. So, and tracking them is very difficult. Like, for instance, our biggest issue is 95. It goes right through the middle of the city. How are we gonna help that? You know, we're gonna put a toll booth up on the other side of Portsmouth. So there's things that the greenhouse gas inventory is never gonna be able to help tackle because you're not changing it. That said, it's still important to have those metrics and that data, but you need it every year. Is it really accurate if you look at it in a year-to-year basis? Is it more accurate if you take longer views where you have more, you know, ability to see changes, whereas in a year-to-year, the changes are gonna be overtaken the following year?
Yeah.
So all that said, I felt like getting a fellow who could commit to it the whole summer would give us a really good inventory to get us back in shape to have another inventory that we can rely on, which I don't think we have in the last two, really.
What were those numbers again, Peter? You said 30.
30,000 or so, they said. I think it'd be closer to 50 based on, I think they just wanted to get
So
the,
50 to support with the fellow
I think,
to do this, but not at a
well, I don't think you
yearly,
need,
maybe
a
every.
fellow, we're paying for a fellow. So if
Right.
the fellow comes, we wouldn't use that money for the greenhouse gas inventory. We'd use a contractor. If we had money to do a greenhouse gas inventory. If you're talking about money for the sustainability efforts of the Planning and Sustainability Department, that could be programmed for that. I don't know if that's a way to put money in the CIP. It
Yeah,
may-
that's-
It may be, but a more general way to support sustainability efforts by the department, where we'd have sort of a discretionary pool of money that we could use to do things. Effie.
Yeah, one thing, you know, I know it's hard with I-95. We also have the airport and we have the port. So one thing I'm thinking about is cruise ships. You know, they start in, they say it's gonna be 3 days a week, only so many ships, but it's growing, right? And nobody's tracking that. So I'd like that included, and it would be someone at the Port Authority that would, they
But we
have those
track,
numbers.
you track the time they're at the dock, because that's in the Portsmouth boundary. Would it be that a cruise ship came here, where do their
All
emissions
those kinds
start
of
and end?
questions, but they would at least be recorded there and
Yeah.
you'd have some kind of baseline, so you'd see the following year, okay, wow, we had so many cruise ships last year and this many this year, you know, and how big were the ships and what, you know, all those things I don't know about, but I would like to see it printed.
I think that we did talk about that, and I don't think anything was ever resolved because these uncertainties are all transportation. And thinking back at the time, I was thinking it's very good to note those and to note the emissions, but the Portsmouth cap should be things that Portsmouth has some direct influence over. It doesn't have direct influence on I-95 or on the port or on the airport. And to note that, but that for putting the resources into action planning and policies and CIP sorts of projects, the focus realistically should be on what the community and what the city itself has control over. But it's very important to note, because the emissions on I-95 certainly would probably dwarf our community
And I
and to
think so-
note that.
and I
I'm just
think
gonna
we-
do a time check
On
real
scale.
quick, cause
Yeah.
we're, I think the real question here is, are we continuing to push and move forward that CIP maybe question of the greenhouse gas inventory? Cause I think in reality, we can't modify it, I would imagine, as far as from a greenhouse gas inventory to a funding for climate action plan action. That feels,
I don't think we could.
yeah, that feels,
But that's like a new item.
that's like a new item. And so then the question really becomes, we just accept that and drop it? Or do we keep something in there? I guess my question for you, Peter, is if, you know, maybe not this fellow, but in the future, if we had funding for, you know, a professional group to come in and just do that inventory, recognizing that it is a snapshot and it's not every year, then the fellow could be used for climate action plan support.
Yeah. I mean,
Yearly, does that make more sense?
If this committee wanted to hire a consultant to do the greenhouse gas inventory, we would pivot, and I would think UNH would allow us to switch the focus. I think it's early enough. Once they apply to they might apply to like 2 or 3 people that are looking for fellows. And it's clearly described what that group wants to do. And so ours will say, conduct a greenhouse gas inventory. But if this committee wants and the CIP goes forward for this year, get that money, then we would tell UNH we want to change what the fellow does, and we would do that. So I think a fellow can be really valuable, and they can work on other climate action
Yeah.
plan items.
So I would propose that to keep that CIP item and to keep this momentum in conversation. And then that is a fund that we would put for every 3 years. That also ensures that it happens every 3 years, and the funding is for a professional group to come in and do our inventory consistent with, in consult with the planning department, obviously, and the sustainability committee. And then that the fellow moving forward, which is yearly, is transitioned to being in support of the CAP and the planning department and like the implementation part, the part that, is
Fellow's
moving the
out of
needle.
the CIP. I took it out of the CIP because a fellow doesn't need to be in the CIP. 'cause
Right, but I'm just saying in general,
That's
I'm
the
like, okay,
structure we would do.
yeah, so in the sense of like, we
We
don't
always
need you
like
to
to
do the
try-
greenhouse gas inventory, but we do want this fellow
We
to
like to
help
try to
us
get
keep
one.
moving. Does that,
That makes sense. And then one issue could be if we're including the CIP and we put the bid out and we told the fellow, hey, instead we want you to work for the planning department, is what if no one bids on it? Then ideally, we could go back to the fellow and say, hey,
Right.
are you down for doing that greenhouse gas inventory instead? And then we would know for future years what have to be.
I think the problem is that the fellow would come with different skills and different interests, and the sort of data-oriented person that would do an inventory may be different than someone that's an interest in waste or buildings or transportation.
Yeah, I don't think we can switch once we've dedicated it up to a thing.
but I think it's a note,
Once they
like
get
this
specific-
first round, but it sounds like we have pretty confidence in the consultants we've used before on this inventory and the general scale. It's all subject to
Yeah.
change. But I just want to make sure, like, if we put the greenhouse gas inventory bookmarked every 3 years in the CIP, one, that does feel a lot more like a CIP item, and then it is, those funds are available, like anything. May need to be adjusted and strategies might change, but then it's there, and it's already an item that we've been advocating for.
Peter, when do you need to lock in your intern?
Well, we'll have to tell UNH, they've given us preliminary notice that we're gonna get one.
Yep.
We're gonna be eligible.
When do you select that person? With respect to skill set,
They start in June-ish, I think we start, they have to. The fellows have to apply, they have to know what to apply for, and so ours is one of the things they would apply for, one of the
Sure.
Jobs. So once they gather all those together, then they put it out to the prospective fellows and they apply. So I'd say in the next month or so, the fellows will be applying. So we gotta get them quickly a change if we're gonna change
Can
it.
they come
we know
with
by
a-
December 8th what our funding is from the CIP for the inventory. Then that'll give you enough time to decide what kind of fellow you need
There's also the side though, if we could put that money in the CIP and then not use it because the fellow is just going to do
Yeah,
it.
I mean,
Then it's there in there.
I will say, maybe I am trying to argue the point, but a lot of communities use these UNH fellows. It's one of their specialties is to get a sustainability fellow to do this work. And so it's not a new thing and I think people get good results, but I do think you could get a VHB in to do a baseline study that you use as your sort of baseline. And then as part of that, what I would say is make it reproducible so that we don't have to spend as much money reproducing it
Yeah.
when we do it in the future. If we're gonna use a consultant, and I've asked fellows to do that, and to some degree we have, but the problem is your data sources change. You know, they change the grid, how they calculate the emissions on the grid, that changes, and then you can't compare your data. You know, it's really, as years go on, a lot of things change, but
Okay.
One option would be not to push for the greenhouse gas. I'm playing devil's advocate here for FY 27, push for FY 28 in case the fellow doesn't work. Like if,
Or to Peter's point, that first one could be more so in like making it more reproducible for the future.
I think whatever we do with a fellow or whoever we do it with, that'll be what we want, is a reproducible inventory. And the data from the city is reproducible. I'm hopeful that because of the biggest challenge, like I said, is the utility data. And I'm hopeful with the community power program, we're gonna have a lot better access to that data. That's the
Yeah.
important data. But as you can imagine, it's very hard to get heating oil data for the whole community. It's very hard to get natural gas data for the whole community. And we've had challenges on every inventory with those things, and you can approach it different ways. But if you approach the heating oil with the census data, that data doesn't change every 3 years. It changes every 5 years or 10 years, you know, so some of these averages that people use are making a challenge.
So I think if we make the CIP proposal broad enough where those funds could be used for like somebody to conduct a greenhouse gas inventory. They could also be used for data source improvement or like outlining a process to be able to make it more let's not confine it to, and it has to be used for conducting an inventory. I think an inventory and supporting data and or
Climate action plan.
climate action plan initiatives. Because that's the argument for this like level of improvement on the greenhouse gas inventory is now that is, you know, it is our metric tracker for the cap and
Yeah.
it puts us to the point I made before, like often grants and such, it's a prerequisite for those and we just don't want to be in a situation where we're scrambling or we're not eligible for something because we haven't done this step. So that was a lot. Got that, Josh? I don't know if that's motionable. It feels like a tweak on kind of what we somewhat had. Alignment? Do we?
Yeah, that sounds like a good assessment. I don't think
Okay.
we need to vote really. It's already in the works.
And I think if Josh is making a motion, you can reflect this.
yeah, I'm
discussion.
gonna. It'll take me a bit to do the motion, but this is good to work off of.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Great, and thank you for that context, Peter. It's
Yeah.
helpful to understand the many moving parts. Great. Anything else on CIP items?
Just wanted to say that the table you sent Effie was helpful. And have never done a comment session before, a hearing before. I am currently trying to compile some best practices on how to do them so that if other folks new to city politics need that in the future, that's great. But also if you have best practices and want to send them to me, that would be super helpful. I had no idea what I was doing and it was very nice to have Bill and Fred there to tell me.
You did a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and
I did 3, I only did 1.
I would make a to pitch for to the point earlier about like supporting initiatives that are already underway and supporting city staff and DPW when they are doing these things, right? I just think that to me is part of the sustainability committee is to also give kudos, help, motivation, help spread that support and make it clear that we continue to support items. And so I think, all of us in alignment with this committee action spreadsheet is also like actions that are currently underway, not just actions we want to happen, tracking those and having conversations about when those meetings are that we can go and make public comment, even if the public comment is just, this is in alignment with the recommendation by the sustainability committee, and alignment with the CAP and just speaking to in support of these actions.
And
more.
that's part of the committee's role and value added is to add a sustainability perspective to important things that are ongoing, even if we don't have to turn ourselves into pretzels, defining it in a way that makes sense to people. We know what we know.
Cheerleaders. Great. Master plan.
I can report on very briefly. I had spoken with Ann Weidman 6 weeks back. She's in charge of community engagement for the master plan, and a lot of us have been involved with the initial meeting and the boards out by the city council chambers. And originally the group had thought that they would have a draft this week before the Thanksgiving holiday, but that's been delayed. They decided they wanted to have the master plan advisory committee review it before it went out to more people. We have a representative on the master plan advisory committee, our own Jess Blasco, and they're meeting December 1st. So the thought is that they will have a draft for January. And at our January meeting, we're planning to have Rick Chelman come. He did a really good presentation to the Economic Development Committee about master planning and what it is. And in the meantime, we all should be looking at the CAP or the Energy Advisory Plan and getting our ideas together, what we think is most important for our committee going in the master plan. I saw what the Economic Development Committee put together. If anyone wants to see it, I'm happy to send it to you. It was quite lengthy and probably more legal terms than this committee would use. But I think putting our priorities in order will be important for what we want to see in the master plan, because it's going to be influential for some years. So that's it.
The paper summaries with the sticky notes are in the foyer in front of the city
Yes.
council chambers, so.
And the website still has the, what do they call
Like
it?
the
Like
postcard.
live polling.
Yeah.
Flow survey's down now, I
Yeah.
think.
Oh, it's down
They
now?
closed in
Just closed
October.
it, yeah.
Okay.
But the, just to add to what Effie said, the Rick Chelman's on that MPAG committee with Jess and others. So if he's coming, then you can, pick his brain about that meeting too, but also that committee is reviewing sort of a draft vision and draft. The draft isn't necessarily a whole plan draft, more of a draft of what they heard. And then what a survey will say to sort of reinforce what they heard and get that back out. They're being pretty successful in terms of getting a lot of survey results, so they'll also give information about that. So we'll get more of an update after that MPAG meeting.
Any questions?
Fred, I took Energy Advisory Committee off the agenda because we had so much to cover today. Is that okay?
I mean, we have,
I'll just save it for next time.
Nothing burning.
Well, the city council will be voting to make the Energy Advisory Committee a standing committee.
great.
So it's like, there was a first vote on Monday and there's a,
Correct. The second vote where the public hearing will be same meeting as the CIP.
Sure.
And then assuming that passes, the rules might be suspended just to do third reading and make it official.
Right.
sounds like there's broad support for it anyway.
Yes.
Did we have other business outside of the next month agenda item?
Yes, two things. One is the item that was content topics, presentations from experts. We had Rachel Lane come from Student Transportation of America, and a lot of people really liked that. So I just wanted to gather ideas from the group. If you know people working in something to do with transportation or housing related to sustainability, we'll brainstorm at another meeting, because I don't think we had time today. And then Colleen had a couple of items she wanted to bring for the committee.
Ideas, and I printed them out because I didn't know. Kate does have them pulled up, but I like physical things. So I have one for like each quadrant. So people can share and make notes if you want to, and then pass them back. Okay, so these are two different projects of,
It's different than that first one.
yes, they're different. Sorry, they're two different things.
Yeah.
They are not exclusionary, except for the fact that we are volunteers and have limited time.
They're different.
But they cover different goals, different topics. The first one is the city
That one?
communications management proposal. This is something that sort of can just be me doing it on my own, but I wanted to invite people in to do it with me, kind of speaking to the fact that we have all these, like you were just saying, like chances where,
Are these guys?
I know it.
Oh,
no,
okay.
you have to share screen.
To do to.
Go up to the video and then do you see share, the green button at the bottom? Right there. Yep.
Thank you.
And then city communication manager to the left. Yep,
Thank
that one.
you.
Perfect. And then share.
Share. Great.
When other committees are doing things that we like or may be interested in, it would be great to know before things move forward. And so this is an effort to more clearly establish, like if people are willing to take on responsibility to track other committees and agendas, and flag when the sustainability committee could speak to an issue, provide advice, collaborate on something. If you scroll down to the bottom, I have a list of committees, some of which we already have people on who are actively doing that. But a lot of which are not, either because I don't have it filled in or because we don't have someone who's actively involved, they aren't covered. And so we as a committee in our advice giving role might be missing opportunities there. And this, in terms of involvement, can look as detailed as actually being on another committee, which I know some people are, or watching the recording and doing a summary, or uploading the recording to an AI summarizer and just looking at the transcript and like doing Control F for building or sustainability or whatever topics you're looking for, just to try and get some sort of regular information flow to us and from us for the other groups in the city.
Probably would be useful among ourselves to prioritize those, because that's a long list and there probably are 5 to 10 that are probably the most relevant.
Yeah, so I was gonna just go based off of committee interest. What are people already involved in, want to learn more about, think they would be able to speak to? Yeah, so just putting that out there. You can email me your responses. You can also
I
do
know
nothing. Yes,
Jess is on the Conservation Commission.
yes, I know that I am. Just have that,
And you don't need to actually add this, but I'm on both the audit committee and the P committee.
okay.
Fun.
You'll continue doing that?
No.
For another month.
Lucky.
So yeah,
This is lame duck.
if you are interested in claiming a committee or just talking about this with me further, please email me.
And is the
The-
school board there?
Yeah, I was gonna say,
board,
should the
yes.
school district be on there?
School board?
The boards.
Yes, there is another page.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of
Oh,
committees.
yeah.
A lot of
So many
committees.
things to do. Yeah, so again, it's as scale upable or scale downable as we have capacity for, but I think it is we have a lot of knowledge in here that goes underutilized that we could.
Well, could I just talk about my experience? I was trying to track the solar zoning amendments, as Peter knows well, through the planning board. And, what's in the meeting packet might not always be what you need.
Mhm.
And then they have other things come up, so it might get postponed a month. So it's very hard tracking these
It's-
things.
It-
I mean, it looks great in the chart, but, or even tracking things happening at city council, you know, and using the recordings and zipping through them and, whatever. It's very time consuming. I just want to put that out there.
No, it really is, and I don't, that's why, again, it's based on committee interest. I also think it's where something like AI can be helpful
Yeah.
in terms of giving those summaries. And I also think that what I would like to get to a point is where those committees are coming and asking us for, hey, we're thinking about a building thing. Can we get the sustainability committee in here and see collaboration? Currently, they're not doing that. And so we kind of have to seek out opportunities.
Sometimes they are. So I went
Sometimes
and
they are.
I was asked as part of the police station conversations to come in and speak to the municipal building policy that we had passed. So I think there are cases, but I think that's a good point in the sense of the legwork on the front end. Like, I agree. I also agree on the tools. I've also used AI videos on the council meetings before, and
Yeah.
it is really nice. Being like, please tell me when this topic comes up in this 4.5 hour meeting. So I like, there are mechanisms, I think, to get a more efficient, but it is very hard. But I do agree in the sense of, I think it's like a couple times, where you go in and, hey, this is something that we're interested in. And I think in that situation with the police department conversation, it was like we had just passed the municipal buildings policy, then we had then asked for it to be in the CIP, and it just like kept coming up. And so then I think they were like, okay, we gotta bring the sustainability people in to talk about this policy that is passed. And so I do think there's a certain amount of that side of things, and maybe off of the cap momentum.
I
It's an
think this
opportunity
is,
to then kind of just remind people that we're here, we're a resource, we want to collaborate with these
I'm
initiatives.
thinking of the renovations we want to do to New Franklin
Franklin.
School.
Yeah,
Maybe
can
this
we
would
be
be
a
a perfect opportunity for us.
this
to
is
connect.
I think a really, really useful, important undertaking, but I think we're gonna have to apply filters according to relevance and time availability. But I think a really good example is the fact that the EDC had a micro mobility
And yeah,
presentation. And also that the parking committee had this great parking study. And,
Mhm.
I went to the briefing for that, but I haven't seen the report. And seeing the report, I think, brought up the relevance of that for what we've been talking about. And I think breaking this up and prioritizing it, I think
Okay,
would really
yeah.
give us some value. But I mean, you don't have to do that. We can look at it and give you some feedback.
That would be
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
I would almost propose we start breaking this up into the different sections of the cap
Okay.
to align with, like, where is this gonna be relevant, right? Where are those actions most likely to cross-reference, and then within that, then prioritize of.
The larger spreadsheet version of this, not the PDF, I have the cap priorities as a column.
Great.
The cap is long, so I haven't
Yeah.
gone through it for all of them. And I did also want to let committee member interest guide it, just because I don't know people's expertise, preferences, all of that. I'm planning to do just like random stuff on my own. Just an invitation to join me.
On this topic, Councilor Denton is our representative from the city council here. Is somebody gonna replace you and attend meetings regularly?
By our ordinance, it's required to have a city councillor. I don't know who it's going to be. The way it normally works is the councillors all submit to the mayor the list of committees they want to be on. And then if more than one councillor wants to be on a committee, the mayor normally defers to the councillor who's been up there the longest. Granted, everyone up there's been up there the same amount of time, except for the mayor and Councillor
New
Faber.
people.
So I do not know who will be. I'm not sure if Councillor Cook will be returning, or maybe it'll be someone new, but they're all good people. So
Can you be emeritus?
if you would like to give me that title, I can be.
That's how we do it with the school board too. We have to have a representative on this committee from the school board. And the same process is used too.
select that person.
Just a quick, because I know we're gonna wrap up soon. The other proposal I have is totally different shift from trying to talk to city. It is about talking to community, specifically trying to target the large number of very cool events we have in Portsmouth and moving those towards zero waste and zero carbon. The packet contains detail, and again, like this would be a much more intensive version than the city communication channels, but I think it would be advantageous and a way to engage the community directly, but in like we could choose how much to take on and then eventually scale up over time. And you can see I put in some of the CAP priorities. Again, please email me,
I need
meet
to
with
get a copy
me.
of that one.
I've put this together and I've talked to Jess and Fred about it, but like I didn't want to go off the meeting entirely. Just want to hear your thoughts eventually, and if there's any interest.
So Colleen, you looked at the list that we did a few years
Yeah.
back that's on
So
Pecan.
That
This
is
is,
reflected in this.
but
Right.
this is for the city to take on?
So the way that I was framing this is that right now we have the recommended guidelines, which are, and we have like a knowledge that is available as needed. So when people seek it out, it is there. And I'd like to instead get to a place where the committee or the city is actively facilitating the implementation of those guidelines instead of the event people themselves saying, I feel a great passion and I want to implement these guidelines. Because all of these events have to go through the council at some step. At the bottom in the appendix, I put in what the event process is. And I think that the knowledge that is captured in those event guidelines and that is held by CCAN and the Sustainability Council Committee can be, scroll down. Do you see that part? The
Event requirements.
page 4, administrative process. Where in this process can we put the event recommendation guidelines?
Well, I know, one year I organized the, what do we call it? The EV car show or whatever, and it was on the Bridge Street lot. So I had to go through the city and it was really quite a process. I was surprised at all the requirements Josh was thinking of. We had to have, I don't know, $2 million insurance certificate and all kinds of things. And you have to be out in front of it, some good lead time. But it was very legal and restrictive. And when we did the list that's on the CCAN website, we intentionally called it guidelines.
Yes.
Because we wanted it to come from people. And for the sustainability fair, everybody gets this list about like not using single waste plastic, not having, what do they call it, swag that's junk and gonna fill our landfills. It's a whole page of things. So this is really a different approach. I'm not against it, but I think,
it is a
Kristen.
continuation. Oh, yeah, Kristen.
Can we, go ahead. Oh, asked on you. Go ahead, Kristen.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kristen Shaw from the Health Department. I just wanted to jump in here to make a comment and then also make myself available to talk about special events in the city. We're reworking our process that you sort of have outlined right here to make it hopefully a little bit easier for anybody that has to walk through holding an event on city property. That's a project that we've been working on for several months currently in-house. The health department obviously spends lots of time at temporary events over the course of the year. So I haven't had a chance to review this document, but I'm very happy to speak with you about possibilities where we can assist in doing this. We already do the single-use plastics for all events that are held on city property where we're allowed to enforce the policy. But I'm happy to set a meeting up so we can talk about this more after I've had a chance to look at this too, so I can possibly update you a little bit on what's available and where we're hoping to go with city, how we handle large special events in-house in the city.
Yeah, no, I will definitely reach out, and I know it's 8:30 now, so again, if you have thoughts, objections, emojis, whatever they are, send them to me and I'm happy to meet or just talk over email.
And
Perfect.
Colleen, I don't remember, did these go out with the agenda?
We did not, Kate has them, I'm just gonna ask her to send them
Great.
to the committee because I met with Jess and refined them
Great.
first.
So
Right.
I would propose we find a time for Kristen to come and present what's happening and that great work, because I think that sounds like building off of these great things that are already happening and seeing how we can plug into that process the best. Kristen, thank you for
Mhm.
popping on and on the very tail end.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Implementation date for some of the changes we're making, I don't have that yet. Some of it hinges on some an in-house system we use for all of this and some changes coming down the line, but it will be for 2026 at this point.
Okay, so maybe in January or February. Even if it's just preliminary and just making sure we have an avenue for that conversation, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to talk about the other pieces for sustainability separate from process maybe. And let me take a look at this, but I'd love to get some FaceTime for that, for the health department.
Great. Thank you very much. Wonderful. I think we covered a lot. So on that, and given that it is 8:31, I'm going to, yes.
Do you have a section when you do public comment, or is that like long since gone?
Well, we can always add items to the agenda. We usually try to do it so that we can fit time in. So happy to have you speak to like what topic, and then we can figure out if we have time now or if we want to fit it to a
Maybe
larger
it's more a
conversation.
question as to where to start my idea. And that is to try to create an ordinance planning, I think, eventually to save mature forests and trees from being wiped out by development. I'm looking, think particularly the development off of Beverly Hill Road, where they literally mowed down several hundred acres of woods. With just a little bit of planning, they could have saved a lot of those mature trees instead of just mowing them all down and then putting up little twigs that will take 70 years to regrow. And I know there are towns in the United States that have protection of mature tree ordinances that require if you're going to develop over a certain amount of land that has a forest on it, that you have to have a plan. Because the developers just try to say, oh, well, there's no way that, we can't save them, and they're in the way and it's too expensive and all that sort of stuff. And I think that we have little pockets of little forested areas, 2 acres here, 3 acres there, 5 acres there, and they just get mowed down. And there's just no protection even for 5, 6 trees that will.
So I would
be-
propose that we make this a wider conversation, because I think there's other committees that this is really relevant with, like the Conservation Committee,
Trees and greenery.
Trees and Greenery Committee. But I think, yes, this is very much a topic that is apt for Sustainability Committee. So I would move that on our December meeting, we set aside time to have a conversation on this topic and how we best engage these other committees, and talk about that like fit on, should that be us representing Sustainability Committee on a Conservation Committee meeting or on a Trees and Greenery. And we can plan a little bit on what's the most effective way, because I think this conversation has definitely come up in different arenas, and just want to make sure it's the most effective. So,
Margo, I think you and I can talk before that and look at what other communities in New Hampshire have done and what state law allows. I think that might be an issue, and it might need some advocacy to change state law to get something done if it's not already possible, but there may be conditional use permit processes we can do that are more innovative zoning, that you can kind of sneak in things that aren't allowed by state law or aren't, specifically allowed by state law, which is how New Hampshire works, unfortunately, sometimes. But I think the Concom would be very interested in that as well. And I think this committee would probably be advocates for it. So it might be a point where we have to get to convincing the city council to lobby the legislature or something like that, if it needs that, or maybe it's something we could put right in our ordinance, which would be a planning board to the city council kind of process. But I think there'd be a lot of support for it.
Thanks.
So it sounds like the plan is to look into some of these options, and on our next meeting, we'll set aside time to talk through what these might be and what that path forward would be, and connecting with the Conservation Committee to help support this conversation. Great. Yeah, of course. Thank you for coming out. Okay, so I'm gonna move to adjourn the meeting today.
So moved.
Do I need a second for that?
Second.
All in favor?
I,
Adjourned. All opposed. Wonderful. Yeah, that was jam-packed. We didn't do an opening question, so I suppose I'll do an opening and a closing question, a bit combined. And mine would be today's meeting, and in general, we see a lot of like unlikely partners or partners we don't expect in initiatives, or correlations between things, or like, cross collaboration and between groups that if sustainability wasn't the topic, they might not have these conversations. And so my question is, what is an example of that kind of gives you hope that you've seen, or even just a conversation that sustainability has brought forward that maybe wouldn't have happened otherwise?
I could go. So, being one of my